It was meant to be a special trip for Angela Carter. Not because flying in first class was something new to her, she had flown in luxury many times before. But this trip felt different. There was a quiet excitement bubbling inside her. She was on the brink of a new beginning, and it filled her with hope and determination. Angela always carried herself with grace. Her tailored suit fit perfectly, her posture was strong, and her face showed calm confidence. But still, most people barely looked at her. To them, she was just another passenger, someone who didn't seem to belong in first class. The flight attendants moved quickly through the cabin. They smiled brightly and spoke kindly to other passengers. They offered warm towels, served drinks, and checked on everyone's comfort. It was clear they wanted the first-class experience to feel special. But when Angela politely asked for a glass of water, things changed. She spoke in a calm voice, "Excuse me, could I have some water, please?" The flight attendant turned, gave her a brief, cold glance, and replied with a short, sharp, "I'll get to you in a moment." Then, she walked away. Angela sat back in her seat, thinking perhaps they were just busy. She waited patiently. She wasn't one to make a fuss or demand attention. Minutes passed, and the attendants continued serving others, offering them drinks, snacks, and cheerful conversation. But no one came back to Angela. The longer she waited, the heavier her chest felt. Being ignored wasn't a new experience for her, but it still hurt. She glanced around the cabin. Other passengers were being treated like royalty, receiving service with big smiles and kind words. Yet, her simple request for water seemed too much for them. She couldn't help but wonder why. Was it her appearance? Her quiet demeanor? Whatever the reason, it was clear she was being overlooked. Angela didn't let her frustration show, but she felt it deep down. She wasn't angry yet. Instead, she noticed everything. The way the attendants avoided her eyes, the way their tone was warmer with others, the way her small presence seemed invisible to them. She was used to being overlooked, but it didn't mean she had to accept it. The people around her didn't seem to notice what was happening. They were focused on their own comforts, enjoying the first-class perks. No one cared that Angela was being ignored. But Angela noticed every single detail. She wasn't just sitting there, waiting for water. She was thinking, watching, and quietly taking in every moment. This wasn't the first time she had been treated unfairly. Life had taught her to stay calm, to pick her battles wisely. But this time felt different. Deep inside, Angela felt a spark of something stronger than frustration. It wasn't just about being ignored. It was about respect, about being seen and treated as an equal. She decided, silently and firmly, that this time, she would not let it slide. Angela's patience was running out. She sat quietly in her first-class seat, watching the flight attendants move up and down the aisle. They were cheerful and kind, going out of their way to make other passengers feel comfortable. The woman in seat 3A had asked for a blanket. The attendant smiled warmly, fetched a soft blanket, and even tucked it around her shoulders. A man in seat 2B asked for another glass of champagne. The attendant laughed at his joke and brought the drink right away, with an extra sparkle in her smile. Angela noticed it all. She noticed how everyone else was treated with care and respect. But her simple request for a glass of water was still ignored. She had asked earlier, using her calm and polite voice, "Could I please have some water?" The flight attendant had barely glanced at her, muttering, "I'll get it when I can," before walking off. Minutes had passed. Then more minutes. But no water came. Angela tried to stay calm. She didn't like to make a scene. She didn't like to draw attention to herself. But now, watching the flight crew attend to every other passenger with such ease and kindness, she couldn't ignore the truth: they were purposely overlooking her. She could feel her frustration growing stronger, like a pot of water slowly boiling on the stove. She pressed the call button above her seat. A small chime rang out, and the same flight attendant appeared moments later. Angela looked up at her and said, "Excuse me, I asked for some water earlier. Could you please bring me some now?" The attendant sighed loudly, so loud that the passengers sitting nearby turned to look. Her expression showed annoyance, as if Angela was asking for something outrageous, like a feast or a personal chef. "I said I'll get to you when I can," the attendant snapped, her voice cold and sharp. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked away again. Angela sat back in her seat. She could feel the tension in the air now. A few passengers had noticed the exchange, but no one said anything. Some glanced at her quickly, then turned away as if they hadn't seen. Angela's hands rested on the armrests, her fingers tightening slightly. Her face, though, remained calm. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't show anger. She had learned long ago that showing anger often made things worse. But inside, something was different this time. Angela wasn't just upset about not getting her water. It was about something bigger. She had faced this kind of treatment before, being dismissed, being treated as though she didn't matter, being ignored when she had every right to be treated like everyone else. She thought about all the times this had happened before, at work, in stores, and even in other parts of her life. Each time, she had swallowed her frustration and moved on. Not this time. This time, something shifted deep inside her. She didn't need the flight attendants' kindness. She didn't need their approval or their fake smiles. But she would not let them treat her as if she didn't exist. Angela took a deep breath, steadying herself. She wasn't just going to sit there and let this pass. This time, she would make sure they saw her. As the plane climbed higher into the sky, Angela stared out the window at the clouds below. Her heart wasn't filled with anger, though she had every reason to feel upset. Instead, her thoughts raced with ideas and possibilities. Angela was no stranger to challenges. In her life, she had faced many people who doubted her, many situations where she had been overlooked or treated unfairly. But each time, she had found a way to rise above it. She didn't succeed because of luck. She succeeded because she worked hard, stayed strong, and believed in herself when no one else did. Sitting in her first-class seat, Angela's eyes turned back to the cabin. She began to watch the flight crew more closely. She noticed things she hadn't paid attention to before. When she pressed the call button earlier, she saw how the flight attendant exchanged a look with her coworker, a smirk that seemed to say, "She can wait." She saw how they moved quickly to help other passengers, offering warm smiles and cheerful words. But when they passed her seat, their faces turned cold, their eyes barely meeting hers. Angela's lips tightened into a thin line, but she didn't react outwardly. Instead, she took mental notes. Every glance, every tone of voice, every small gesture told her a story. It wasn't just about her water request anymore. It was about something bigger, respect and fairness. Angela had learned a long time ago to pick her battles carefully. And this was a battle worth fighting. Suddenly, her phone buzzed softly in her lap. The plane had reached cruising altitude, and the in-flight Wi-Fi had just connected. Angela unlocked her phone and saw a new message from her assistant. It was short, just a few words, but those words made her heart skip a beat. "The deal is finalized. You now own the airline." For a moment, Angela just stared at the screen. She read the message again, making sure she hadn't misunderstood. Then, a small smile spread across her face. It wasn't a big, flashy grin. It was quiet, confident, and full of meaning. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. As the plane hummed softly in the background, Angela leaned back in her seat. She thought about the path that had brought her here. She thought about the hours of planning, the long meetings, the challenges she had faced to make this deal happen. And now, sitting in this cabin, being ignored and disrespected by the very people who worked for her company, Angela felt a sense of calm determination. She wasn't angry. She wasn't going to lash out or cause a scene. That wasn't her style. But she knew what she needed to do. The smirks, the dismissive tones, the unfair treatment, they all reinforced her belief that things needed to change. And Angela? She was the perfect person to make those changes happen. As she folded her hands neatly in her lap, Angela's mind began to plan. The flight attendants didn't know who she was yet, but they would. And when the time came, she would make sure they understood exactly how much one person's actions could matter. As the plane rolled to a stop at the gate, Angela stayed seated. While the other passengers grabbed their bags and shuffled off the plane, she remained calm and composed. She wasn't in a hurry. There was something important she needed to do, and she wanted to make sure she had the crew's full attention. The flight attendants were busy smiling and saying goodbye to the other passengers. Their cheerful voices filled the cabin as they thanked everyone for flying with them. But Angela noticed the difference in their tone when they spoke to her earlier. Their smiles had been missing, their words sharp and dismissive. Now, as the last of the passengers exited the plane, Angela stood up slowly. Her movements were deliberate, her face steady. She walked toward the front of the plane, her steps soft but purposeful. The flight crew noticed her coming and exchanged quick, uneasy glances. They whispered to one another, as if trying to figure out why she was still on the plane. One of them, the same attendant who had ignored her earlier, stepped forward with a forced smile. "Is there something else you need?" the attendant asked, her voice tight. Angela tilted her head slightly, her calm demeanor hiding the weight of what was about to happen. "Yes," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I need to speak with you." The attendant's smile faltered. She seemed caught off guard by Angela's direct tone. Okay," she said, shifting nervously. Angela reached into her elegant bag and pulled out a sleek black folder. She held it firmly as she handed it to the attendant, who took it with hesitant hands. The attendant's fingers trembled slightly as she opened the folder. Her eyes widened as she read the bold words at the top of the page, "Notice of Management Change." "What is this?" the attendant stammered, her voice shaky. Angela took a step closer, her gaze steady but unyielding. "This," she said calmly, "is a notice letting you know that I am the new owner of this airline." The attendant's face turned pale, her confident demeanor crumbling in an instant. The other crew members froze, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. The cabin was silent now, the cheerful goodbye chatter gone. The weight of Angela's words hung in the air like a storm cloud. Angela crossed her arms, her voice firm but controlled. "I think it's time we had a talk about how you treat your passengers. Especially the ones you think don't matter." The attendant looked as though she might faint. I didn't know," she began, but her words trailed off. Angela raised a hand, silencing her. "That's exactly the problem," she said. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to find out. But I'm here now, and things are going to change." The flight crew stood in stunned silence as Angela turned and walked away, her head held high. The quiet power she carried left no room for argument. For the first time, they saw her clearly not as a passenger, but as someone they should have respected all along. Within a matter of days, the news about Angela Carter and her airline spread everywhere. People couldn't stop talking about it. Headlines read, "Passenger turned owner transforms airline after facing discrimination." Social media was buzzing with the story of how Angela, a passenger who was ignored and disrespected, had risen to become the boss of the very company that treated her poorly. But Angela's story wasn't just about firing a rude flight attendant. It was about making real, lasting changes. Angela didn't act out of anger. She acted with purpose. She understood that the problem wasn't just one person's attitude, it was a system that allowed such behavior to happen. So, she decided to fix it. One of her first moves as the new owner was to review the airline's customer service protocols. What she found didn't surprise her. There were no strong rules in place to ensure passengers were treated with equal respect. This, she decided, had to change immediately. Angela called for a complete retraining of all employees, from flight attendants to ground staff. Every worker was required to attend workshops on customer service, kindness, and respect. She introduced a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination, making it clear that disrespect toward any passenger, no matter who they were, would not be allowed. Angela's focus wasn't just on punishing bad behavior, it was on teaching people how to be better. The former crew members who had ignored her? They didn't escape accountability. Angela used their actions as an example during the training sessions. Without naming them publicly, she shared her experience to teach others what not to do. Every passenger deserves respect, she told the employees. You never know who is sitting in front of you. But most importantly, you should treat everyone with kindness because it's the right thing to do. At first, some employees were nervous about the changes. Would they be fired if they made a mistake? But as they attended the training sessions, they began to understand Angela's vision. She wasn't trying to scare them, she was trying to create an airline where everyone, employees and passengers alike, felt valued and respected. Slowly, the culture of the company began to shift. Workers who once felt unappreciated started to feel proud of their jobs. Passengers noticed the difference, too. Flights became more enjoyable, the service more thoughtful. Angela's efforts didn't stop there. She set up a system where passengers could easily share feedback after their flights. Every compliment and complaint was reviewed carefully, and employees who went above and beyond were publicly praised. This motivated the staff to do their best, knowing their hard work was noticed. The airline's reputation grew quickly. Passengers began recommending it to their friends and family, calling it the most respectful and caring airline in the skies. Within a year, Angela's airline became one of the top-rated in the industry. People marveled at how much had changed in such a short time. Angela, though, stayed humble. She didn't make long speeches or demand recognition. When asked about her success, she simply said, "I just wanted to make things better not just for me, but for everyone who flies with us." Her story became a symbol of resilience and grace. Angela showed the world that even in the face of disrespect, it's possible to rise above and create positive change. Her quiet strength inspired countless others, proving that when faced with unfairness, you can choose to lead with kindness and still come out on top. Angela's story wasn't about getting back at the people who had treated her poorly. It wasn't about anger or revenge. It was about something much bigger. Angela wanted to show the world that respect matters, no matter who you are. She wanted to prove that every person, no matter where they come from or what they look like, deserves to be seen and treated with kindness. Her journey became a powerful example of standing up for yourself and for others in a way that brings real change. When people underestimate you, Angela once said, you have two choices: stay silent or make a statement. I chose to make a statement not just for me, but for everyone who's ever felt invisible. Those words stayed with everyone who heard her story. Angela's calm but firm actions reminded people that you don't have to shout to be heard. You don't have to fight with anger to win. You can stand tall, speak clearly, and let your actions show your strength. And when you do, the world has no choice but to notice. Her decision to change the airline wasn't just about fixing one problem. It was about building something better for the future. By creating rules that demanded respect and fairness, Angela showed her employees and passengers that kindness isn't just important, it's necessary. Her story inspired people far beyond the airline. Others in the business world began looking at their own companies, asking, how can we do better? Angela's quiet leadership started a ripple effect that reached farther than she ever imagined. For Angela, the greatest victory wasn't the headlines or the praise she received. It was seeing the difference her work made. Passengers began writing letters and sending messages, thanking her for creating an airline where they felt welcome. Employees started to take pride in their jobs, knowing they were part of something special. Angela didn't just change an airline, she changed lives. But Angela's journey didn't stop there. She continued to remind people that small actions can make a big difference. She encouraged others to speak up when they saw something wrong, to take a stand when they felt overlooked. Even the quietest voice, she said, can make the loudest impact when it's fueled by determination and integrity. Angela's story became a symbol of hope and resilience. It showed people that being underestimated doesn't mean you're powerless. It means you have the chance to rise above, to prove that your worth isn't defined by others. Angela soared higher than anyone could have expected, not because she sought revenge, but because she chose to lead with grace and strength. Her message was simple but powerful: you can be kind and still be strong. You can be quiet and still be heard. And when you stand up for what's right, you can change the world, one small step at a time.